Então, bom dia a todos.
Good
morning.
Good morning once again. Good morning to all.
So we are back here to talk a little bit about English for international relations, because when we talk about English and we think, oh, English is a language that can be used anywhere, and now when we in the past when we talked about international relations, we talked about French, because French was the international language. But after the Second World War, it shifted to the center of the world after Europe was completely broken, became the United States. So English became the language for international communications. So if you need to relate to any country today, English is the language.
Yes. And for everything, actually, in our courses that we are preparing, and we're going to start a course on this Saturday on legal English. But everything that you do nowadays, which is a globalized world, all of the language, communication in general, contracts, it's English. Let's say the reference is the English language, the English wording, as palavras, né? Os conceitos, na informática também, né? In also technology, softwares, English has been used, replaced the French, right? That's
yes.
True.
French was the international language. It still is in many cases, but most of, for example, the apostille of Aya, it's French. It's Convention Internationale. So it's used, but English has become the international language. And when we talk about international relations, we talk that, international affairs, everything that happens today with internet and all this, modern communications, it's immediate that you got to know what is happening in the world. And then you start to use terms, expressions, the language in English usually today.
Yes. For example, let's give an example so that you understand. What is happening nowadays with this virus, with this COVID, right? People are talking about the new normal. This expression, the new normal, of course, is in English, but the whole world is using this expression, the new normal, right?
Yes.
So, the new normal. So, what is the new normal? What does it mean, the new normal? So, we have to understand these expressions. And something that you said earlier about what is happening in the United States with the death of Floyd. So what is the expression they are using there? Black
Lives matters.
Black lives matters. So it's like the big logo. This is the expression. So we have to understand to really see what is happening worldwide, and everybody's using it. So yes, English is, let's say, is the basis of all international relations and communication around the world.
So we have a little bit. So how business English and international relations are connected? As I said, an expression that is created in the United States or is created anywhere in the world becomes, we start to use it. So, for example, it's very interesting. We talk about churrasco, right? How do you translate churrasco? Everybody says, okay, barbecue,
Yes,
right?
barbecue.
But now there is a new expression in English that is cook out. Everybody
out.
says, what is this cook out? It's to cook out, cook outside.
Yes.
And in Portuguese, how do you translate that? Churrasco.
Churrasco.
It's the same word. Because what are you going to cook out? Usually it's churrasco.
Cook out. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are many expressions in English, and it's a language that is always changing, like Portuguese. But and since we use English as an international language, we watch movies in English. So it's the language that is being used for all this communications.
Also for the transformation, because remember when we were in Paris, and a lot of the new words were in French. They use English. Of course, the French people, the old people that are in France, they don't like to use English terms. But for example, final de semana. Final de semana in English is weekend. But they use the same word in French. Because the French word for weekend é petit fin de semaine. É muito longo, né? It's very long. It's not practical. So they use the English term. So in Paris, you can say weekend. You can say weekend also.
In Italian too?
In Italian
Yeah,
too.
you say weekend.
So you see that the English, it's easier to evolve with new expressions, new words, whereas in other languages it's more difficult. So we have to understand these expressions in English.
And we think, how does this relate? Because of course, you have to understand the language, but if you want to know what is happening in the world, you have to know English, because many things that the news, for example, that come to us, they come a little bit distorted. And if you don't know English, you cannot go to the source to understand exactly what is happening in the world. So in any international relation, you have to know English as the language to understand how to communicate and understand what is happening.
So just like if you want to learn philosophy, you have to learn German or Greek to understand theology. Nowadays, if you want to understand the world, you have to understand English.
And and then we think how trilogy is related to the learning of English as an international tool. Well, for you to understand the world, it's not enough for you to understand the language, because you have to know why things are happening and how they are related, and how does this can interfere in our lives here. For example, it's very interesting to know this question of the situation we are facing today, like this COVID-19. Why this is happening? What is the situation now in Brazil, and why the situation in Brazil is as it is, and what's the relation between Brazil and the other countries? So you will see that everything that we are applying here, that we are doing here, it has started somewhere, because COVID started in China, then to Europe, and then United States, then Brazil. So we are doing exactly why the world is doing exactly the same thing if the conditions in each country is different. What is really happening?
What is behind? What is the cause? So we have to go to the root cause, the essence to try to interpret and understand the situation. Because we understand that this question of the virus is a symptom. But what is behind? What's the real cause behind this, what is happening? What led to the virus, for example? What is the cause? What is behind? So Trilogy, we try to analyze the social causes, the individual, the psychological, the question of the energy behind this is very important to understand. This correlation, right? Because the science of trilogy is to put all of these elements together, right? All of these elements together to fully understand what is happening. So I think that's the main purpose.
And there are, of course, and there are things that are happening in other countries that for us to understand, we can only understand if we know, if we read directly in the source, if we understand directly what is happening there, and if we go directly to the source. And the only way for us to go directly to the source is by using the international language today, which is English.
Which is English. So let's move on to our next slide.
Yeah.
A different view of the world. Okay, I'm going to read this so that you can follow along. A different view of the world. There are opportunities to choose from a wide range of specialists, core and option modules, covering issues such as in European political integration, international terrorism, and the Middle East crisis, and to take part in United Nations and Middle East simulations, gaining an insight into the political process. You can also take part in other activities that are related to the subject, such as the Department of Politics and International Relations weekly political radio show, and learn other useful skills such as presenting and audio editing.
So, for you to know the situation of the situation of the world, for you to know what is on the news, for you to know why terrorism is as it is, for you to know the situation that we are living in Brazil, because everything that happens in the world will have a consequence here. And for you to know that, for you to understand a radio program abroad. Now with internet we can listen to radio programs everywhere in the world. For you to understand what's going to be the future in Brazil, what is how our what they call the new normal will be. So for you to understand, to live today in an international environment, the English is the language for you to know.
Yeah, and also this what is happening now, it's a very clear, let's say, example that whatever happens anywhere in the world, there will be consequences for each and every one of us. So Brazil is not isolated. No countries are isolated anymore. What is happening is that all of these actions are combined. All of these resolutions are for everyone. It's not like, oh, this is a Chinese thing, or the things that are happening from now on are not going to be, they're going to be different for everyone. No. All of the coming resolutions are coming from international organizations. For example, the Health International, World Health Organization now, the WHO. We call it in English the WHO. Here at OMS,
Yes.
So they are actually giving the resolutions, the decisions are coming from a board of doctors and scientists. They are deciding how the world is going to do, what the actions are going to be. So the world is getting very, very small because of these things, this international globalization. It seems like we are going towards one big state that decides everything.
And it's interesting that I used to be an interpreter for many years, for many conferences, and there were new concepts coming from other countries. And it's interesting that in many cases, they we hear a concept coming from another country, and then we translate into Portuguese, or we use the English, but most of the time they translate into Portuguese, and it has no connection to Brazil or to the situation in Brazil, but they just translate the term and start using it, and we don't even know what they're talking about. And it's, for example, they say, because you say to address a conference, and they start saying, eu vou endereçar uma conferência. I mean, what is it's
Quer dizer, traduzir, to translate, não é traduzir a palavra, it's not to translate the word, but to translate its meaning, right? The concept into that specific language. So, this course that we are doing, we are trying to show the people some of these nuances. You think that, another example that we said earlier, you're going to talk about o ministro da Justiça. So if they're going to say in English something like the Attorney General, aí o tradutor vai dizer o quê? O Procurador-Geral. No, it's not Procurador-Geral.
The Attorney General, Ministro da Justiça. But the General Attorney,
yes. The General Attorney é o Procurador-Geral. So there are many different things there. You have to be very specific in these questions.
No, and there are many cases that people understand completely different. You know, for example, even the ministry today they called Ministry of Foreign. It's kind of strange because all the organs in Brazil, all the bodies, they are registered internationally with a different name. Sometimes it's not exact translation because in the past I don't know why they translated in a certain way, and now it's, for example, Brazil is known all over the world as the Federative Republic of Brazil, but federative doesn't exist in English. I mean, doesn't mean anything. Yes. It should be Federal Republic of Brazil. But because it was translated way back in the past as Federative Republic, now it's known all over the world as Federative Republic of Brazil. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was, I don't know why, they translated like the Ministry of Foreign Relations. And it's known as the ministry, that's the registered name. Okay, you can say Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but the official name is this. And there is a manual in the Itamaraty saying how you should translate everything and how things should be addressed to one ambassador or another, how things should be, because this is the international relations and we cannot change a name. It's like, because you are Pedro, you're not going to be Peter in the United States. Just because there is a name for Peter, for Pedro in English, that doesn't mean that you are Peter.
And also in England, right? For example, you say the Ministro da Economia. How do you say Ministro da Economia in England?
It's the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
So it's cultural. This name goes all the way back, right? Because of the kings, it's a cultural thing. So imagine, it's not the Minister of Economy, the business, is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So can you imagine, there are so many things that we try to understand when we are relating internationally, this international relation. Do you want to move forward? Because we don't have...
let me see here. And so we try also, because the most difficult thing when you're relating to a foreign person or in foreign relations, the most difficult thing is to be calm and to try to understand, and not because when you speak, people get very nervous and they stop. They just blank and they don't know what to say and they don't understand anymore. It's like in my students, they always say, we put a video, for example, they start hearing, and suddenly they say, I say, did you understand? And they say, no, I didn't understand everything. But say, why? You know, you have English enough for you to understand. Because he said one word that I didn't know what it was, and then I blocked and I didn't understand anything anymore.
Como se falasse assim, eu fiquei preso. I was kind of blocked, eu fiquei presinho na palavra, so you kind of lose attention of the whole context because you didn't understand one word. You want to be so specific. Like, I have to understand everything, absolutely everything. So they kind of freeze people. I didn't understand. I don't know how to translate this. I don't know. So the person keeps talking. We're still reading the context, the text, but the person is thinking about that
word.
Only word that she didn't understand. She kind of blocks this. This is a problem.
And so communication has a psychological thing. It's like a trigger. It's a psychological trigger that can block you or can. So it is much more psychological than it is, related to the language.
Yeah.
Of course, you have to know the language too, but the psychology is the most important thing in communication.
Really, this is really so. What makes a huge difference between the people when they are learning a language or communicating? It's not what they really know of the language. I'm not saying this is not important, like Pérsio said. This is really important. But what stands out, what's going to make the big difference, is how you communicate what you know. And the psychological, your emotions are a big deal in this matter. I mean, they are going to be set the guides for you how to talk to somebody or feel natural. This is something that here in the work that we do in Millennium and the work of Trilogy, we really go deep in these aspects to try to make the person feel connected with your own emotions and try to deal with these emotions and cope with their feelings and how to communicate. Like Pérsio just said, is more than there's more than the language itself, like vocabulary. It's much deeper. It's a question of the emotions.
Yeah, and so many times I have lots of students that they have a good vocabulary, they have a good understanding of the language, but then comes the psychological part and they block just because they sometimes because of the voice of the other person, sometimes because of the tone of the voice or the way the person is speaking or the accent or this or that. But this is completely secondary. It's much more if you really put your mind into it, you can understand, because you know, if you know the language, you can understand. And even if you don't know one or another word, you understand the context, because that's, communication is 80% body language, connection to the other person, and only 20% language.
And also, there's sometimes you have people talking and they fully understand the language, but nobody understands what he's talking about. So he knows the language, he has no problem with the vocabulary, but he speaks in a way that the speaker is not relating himself with the public. He is totally, narcissistic. He's only looking towards himself, but he's not communicating. People are not understanding. So he's losing the audience, the public. He doesn't know what to do or what to say. And people are saying, what in the world this person is talking about? So communication is definitely way beyond understanding a language.
So for example, here, I have lots of people now. I see that there is Masami. Hello, Masami. You ask a question, if Ministro da Economia, it would be Secretary of Treasury. Yes, but in England, specifically in England,
Yes.
it's the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But it's the official name. But okay, you could say Secretary of Treasury. They will understand. It's not a problem because in many countries it is. But that's the official name in England. But for example, it's interesting because we are talking to you, but we are not seeing you. We don't know what's your reaction. Are you understanding? Do you have any questions? So this is a psychological thing. When you have people around you, then you can see, you can feel, you can see the faces, you can feel the people. What are they? What are their questions? Do they understand? They don't understand. So this is a much more psychological situation than it is.
Exactly. Well, I'm thinking about when I was a kid. And sometimes my mother or my father didn't speak anything. They didn't have to. Just the way they look at you, they are communicating. If they are pleased, if they're angry, if they agree or disagree with what you're doing. So the body language sometimes is much more important and stronger. Just the way they look at you, it's enough.
And so communication is much more, and understanding, it's much more psychological than it is based on language. It's much more, sometimes you don't, as you said, you don't have to say anything to understand, or you don't have to hear anything to understand what the other person is feeling, or what you could say. So diplomacy has a lot to do with a psychological balance,
and also,
much more.
Yeah, and timing, right? Diplomacy is timing, is trying to understand what the other is trying to say or wants to hear. So the body language, so you have to be a good communicator, you have to understand your public, or try to see what the other is thinking and feeling. So you have to so being narcissistic is a big problem, because the narcissism is about you, who you are. And you have to look towards someone. You have to look to someone to see and try to communicate.
And it's interesting, like for example, in the past, they had this silent movies, or Charlie Chaplin, for example. Yeah. He didn't say a word, but he conveyed the message perfectly well. So everybody, because he was in tune with what, the thoughts and the understanding and the what people really wanted. So he gave to people what they wanted. So he was a perfect communicator. Yes. He communicated very well without any words. And so communication is much more psychological and diplomacy and international relations is much more related to psychological communication than it is to language. Even though, of course, you have to know the language.
Okay, but since we are running out of time today, it's 11:35 already. We have to stop earlier, but we like to say that this Saturday we are starting a course, our here. Course is let me put on the screen. The course that we are introducing this Saturday is this one: Comunique-se com segurança em contextos jurídicos internacionais. For all of those who are interested in participating in our course, it's legal English course. It's going to be in English and Portuguese. So this is the time for you to fazer a sua matrícula. Né?
because we want to what we are going to give in this course. It's also how to understand the differences between the different legal systems in the world and Brazil. Of course, we're not going to be able to do this in 10 hours, but we are going to give
an overall,
an overall idea.
All right, so thank you once again for watching us and participating with your questions. And maybe we're going to back to you maybe tomorrow or next week, okay?
Okay. Thank you very much.